Hello, this is Chris from StratumSoft. In this demo, we're going to see how we can use Examin's SOAP project feature to create SOAP clients to invoke SOAP web services that are running remotely or locally. So the first step is to download a SOAP service which you can use as your test service. You may already have one that you have developed, or in this demo I'm going to use the Apache CXF project, which comes with a lot of good samples that we can run locally. So in this there is a WSDL first example that we can use. This sample shows how you can create a web service using a contract first approach. That is where you use the WSDL document first to create your web service. So I've already downloaded Examine and Apache CXF. So you can, if you're following along, you can do the same. Once you download the Apache CXF project, you should go to the samples project folder and to the WSDL first folder and use Maven to start the server which will host the web service. So what this does is, we seem to have run into an error. Okay. Right. Let's see. Alright, so this results in the Apache CXF sample service starting up on port 9090. So this is the address that the web service is running. So we can copy this and keep it handy. And the next step is to go and start Examine if it's not already running. So in my case, I have it stopped, so I'm going to start it now. So by default, Examine starts on port 8080, and once Examine has started, we can go ahead and open that port and log in with the default credentials, or if you've changed the credentials, use that. And we can go ahead and create a new project, choose SOAP client, and in this I'm going to use the URL that we have and append $WSDL, which will usually provide us the WSDL document from the running web service. And you can give us a project name. By default, if you tab out, the project name is determined from the URL that you have specified. And you can also create all the scenarios for the various WSDL operations that are present in that document. If the URL has some authentication enabled, or if it requires it, you can go to the authentication tab and enable HTTP authentication and choose the appropriate basic or digest authentication type. In this case, this web service does not require any authentication, so we don't need to enable this. And also, this web service doesn't require SSL, but if the endpoint is secured and is only accessible over SSL, then you would have to enable this. And we will see this functionality in the next demo, where we'll talk about how to configure key stores and trust stores and how you can invoke a web service over SSL. But in this demo, we are only going to see how to invoke a regular HTTP based SOAP web service. So once this is set up, you can click on OK, and you can see that this web service had two operations, one called update customer and one called get customers by name. And by default, since we chose the create scenarios option, two scenarios are created for each of the operations. You can create more or different scenarios by right clicking on each operation and choosing create scenario. but for this demo we'll just use the default ones that are created by Examine. If you select the web service itself, you can see the details for this, and you can also view the WSDL that we use to create this web service. And there is an XML view and also a tree based view to look at the WSDL structure. And you can also export this document and save it locally if you want. And if you click on the operation scenario, let's say this is the test update customer scenario, and you can see that there is a default client request SOAP request document that's created. You can format this, and this is the XML structure for the update customer operation. And you can notice that this request tab has the request URL populated here. By default, this URL is obtained from the WSDL document. And if you want, you can add additional endpoints by clicking on the plus sign there. And this is especially useful if you want to, for example, use TCP-mon to monitor the outgoing request and the incoming response. Or you can actually just edit this by clicking on this one and changing the URL. So once this is set up, we can go ahead and invoke the service. So we want to make sure that the service is still running. So the service is still running here, and we're going to go ahead and invoke it and see what happens. So the update customer takes a request and it only sends back a 202 accepted. So in this case the request was accepted. It's a one-way operation, and the request was sent to the service and it was saved on the service, and the service just responded with a 202 accepted message. So in this case there is no response that is received by Examine. So this is one way to call the or execute the scenario for that update customer operation. So the next one we can look at is the get customers by name operation, where this has a very simple XML request where we just pass in the name. In this case I'm just going to go with the default value that's populated for demo purposes. So we can go ahead and call this service and see what happens. This is a two-way operation, so we should see some XML SOAP response coming back. Oh, it looks like we're getting connection refused error message, so we should go and see if the service is still running. It looks like the sample service exited after we invoked it the first time around, so I'm going to go ahead and start it again. So the server is now running again. We can go ahead and close this dialog box, try to call it again. And so in this case now we got a valid SOAP response back from the running SOAP service. So the HTTP headers tab displays the response HTTP headers, and the status is 200 OK, which means that the response came back correctly. And this is the SOAP response that came back, and we can actually click on format to look at the actual SOAP response contents. So you can also click on export to export this result into an external XML file. And if you click on the tree, you can look at the tree view representation for this response. So that is it for this demo. To recap, it basically shows you how to create a SOAP project using a remote WSDL from a running web service and invoke the operations by using the default scenarios that are created for them. In the next demo, we will look at how we can invoke a similar sample service that's provided by the Apache CXF project that's running on SSL. And in the upcoming demos, we'll also demonstrate how the other functionalities like WS security and how you can create a test case and so on. Hope you like this demo, and we invite you to download a copy of Examine from stratumsoft.com. You can click on download and get a 2-week trial for Examine and try it out, and let us know if you encounter any issues using our support site, or you can use the contact us tab to get in touch with us. Thank you very much.